Can you hit pause?
Alright, welcome back, and today we're going to be making steaks. It's summer, it's full barbecuing mode, so we're going to make some steaks and some sides. So first we're going to make a béarnaise sauce. So what you're going to need is half a shallot, peppercorns, tarragon, white wine vinegar, and a little bit of water. So we're going to take those shallots into a pan. We're going to throw in some peppercorns. These are about 5 peppercorns to that half shallot. About half a cup of distilled white wine. If you can find tarragon vinegar, even better. And about 2 sprigs of tarragon right into that pan, and that's going to go onto the heat and reduce by half. We're going to strain that off, and this is our base for our hollandaise. You're also going to need 4 egg yolks and about a 1/4 cup of melted warm butter. So we're going to whisk all that together. Along with that vinegar and tarragon. And then over some boiling water, we're going to whisk the egg yolks till they start to become thick. You'll notice it that all of a sudden almost turns into a little bit of a sauce itself. So we're just gonna keep whisking it, taking it on and off the heat so that it doesn't scramble. And we're gonna do this quite vigorously till you notice it's thickened. This can take up to 5 minutes, just depends on how hard you're whisking it and how much heat is actually being transferred into that bowl. Do be careful, you do not want scrambled eggs. So here the eggs have thickened, they've gotten a little bit foamy, everything's mixed together quite well, and we're gonna slowly, very slowly, start adding in our melted butter. The butter's quite warm. Your eggs should be tempered at this point due to the heat from underneath, but do be careful, and you're going to do this slowly while whisking non-stop. This is important because what you're doing here is creating an emulsion. So if you add it too fast, what you're gonna have is butter and a bunch of eggs. So you want that to be homogeneous and combine into one equal sauce. So we're gonna continue this whisk non-stop, nice and vigorous. Depending on how thick you like your hollandaise, I'm going for a slightly thinner version here, just a little lighter. Make sure you use your third hand to hold that bowl. But if you'd like it a little bit thicker, you can always add just a little bit more butter, and that will thicken it up as it goes. If it does separate, adding a little bit of water while whisking can kind of save your hollandaise. At one point, you're just gonna go beyond repair and you're gonna have to start from the beginning. So do be careful and watch it. And if you do what I did, make sure that you get a bigger bowl and don't start with such a small bowl. It was just becoming too difficult. But you can see here it's already beginning to thicken. I've only gone about halfway through that butter. So we're gonna keep doing this. It's hard work, you're gonna get a nice workout. If you don't wanna do it by hand, I recommend doing it in a Vitamix if you have one, or a hand blender, and just slowly adding that butter in. It will save you a lot of time, and your forearm for sure will thank you. So we've reached the thickness that I'm looking for, that I enjoy for this one sauce. We're gonna add a little bit of lemon juice and salt, and we're gonna season it. At this point, you can add a little bit of cayenne if you want some spice and smoke. I like that a little bit, not too much. I don't want it too spicy. All right, so for the sides, we're gonna do asparagus today. So we're gonna crack off the bottom halves of those asparagus. This is very woody and chewy. So just by grabbing the bottom of the asparagus and twisting it, it will snap. And that's the part that you don't want. So it kind of tells you where it should go. So you don't have to, there's no part to look for or anything like that. Just by pulling it, it's gonna snap and where it needs to be. That's all you gotta do. So we're gonna do this with all of them, and this will make the asparagus less chewy at the end. I'm sure you've all experienced that really chewy end of asparagus that you spend an hour sitting there chewing on, wondering when will it actually be edible. Now, if you're anything like me, you're gonna want everything to look nice and even, so I like to line everything up and kind of chop off those bottom pieces so that everything's nice and straight. And we're gonna do these asparagus 2 different ways. One just simply roasted with a little bit of olive oil, salt, and pepper. And the other one is gonna be sherry vinegar, shallots, garlic, and a little bit of olive oil and salt and pepper as well. 2 different ways, and we're gonna do 2 different sauces as well for both of those different ways. So for one of them, we're just gonna slice these shallots nice and thin. So about a shallot and 2 cloves of garlic, nice and thin. And I've preheated my oven to 350 degrees, so onto a sheet tray, a little bit of olive oil, and we're going to do on one side our plain roasted, just salt and pepper. On the other side, we're going to do our shallots, garlic, and sherry vinegar. So make sure that they're not stacked so they can all brown evenly and cook evenly. And we're going to add a little bit of olive oil on top as well so that they don't stick. And then we're just going to season them, salt, pepper. On one side, we're going to do the shallots, so just go ahead and mix those right on top. We're going to do the same with the garlic, kind of toss it around, make sure it's all over the place. Season them. And we're going to add our sherry vinegar. So about a tablespoon of sherry vinegar kind of tossed around in there. This is just for acidity. I quite enjoy it. If you have balsamic, that'll be fine too, or apple cider vinegar. I just prefer sherry. I think it's one of my favorites, especially for this asparagus. And this is going to go into the oven for about 10 minutes. I like to then finish it on broil to get some of that char, a little bit of that bitter aspect to the asparagus themselves. All right, from here we're going to make our second sauce, and this is going to be a port sauce. So this is going to be about a shallot, minced nice and fine, along with a sprig of rosemary, a little bit of butter, beef jus or beef stock. You can get store-bought or you can make your own at home. It's all up to you. And about a half cup of port. So once you've minced all of your shallot and garlic up, we're going to take a sauce pot and we're going to add a little bit of butter and add those shallots and garlic to that, and we're going to cook this till it's translucent. We don't want too much browning. So while that's starting to cook, we're going to clean off our rosemary and we're going to mince this as well. Super fine here, nice and thin. Make sure you don't have any stem, none of that woody stuff. We're just gonna mince this, and that is it. Super simple. All right, so our onions and shallots are nice and translucent, you can see there, and we're going to add about a half cup of your beef stock or beef broth. It's gonna go in, and we're gonna reduce this by half. From here, we're going to add our half cup of port. I like port, it's a little richer, it's a little sweet, it's gonna become nice and viscous. And about a tablespoon of Dijon will be added in as well. This is gonna add a little bit of tang, a little bit of heat. So you can go ahead and throw that in with the port, and we're gonna whisk that all together so it all is combined, and we're gonna reduce this by half. At this point, you're gonna add in your rosemary, and you're gonna essentially steep it as if it were a tea. So we're gonna get all that flavor in there. Whisk it around, and we're going to strain it off so you get rid of all of those shallots and garlic, so it's a nice clean sauce. And we're going to finish it, of course, with some salt and a little bit of butter, and we're just going to stir that butter in till it's all combined. This is going to add a little bit of richness and a shine to the sauce. So our asparagus are done, they've blackened a little bit, and that's it. So we're gonna start with the steak itself. So I've left the steak out overnight in the fridge uncovered to dry a little bit, and then I bring it out about an hour before I'm gonna cook so that it can temper at room temperature, and I'm gonna heavily season both sides. I don't like to add pepper because as pepper cooks, especially at high heat, it does become a little bitter, so I like to add it after it's come off the pan. All right, and we'll need a heavy bottom skillet, and we're gonna get this ripping hot, so a neutral oil just a little bit so that we can not have too much sticking. We're going to put in the steak, and we're gonna press it down just a little bit, and we're not gonna touch it. We're gonna let it get nice and crusty. Don't poke it, it's not a thing. We're gonna let it get nice and crusty. We're gonna check on it. So you can see it's starting to brown on the outside. And by moving it around like this, you're gonna kind of move it around, and this actually helps build a great crust on your steak. So by turning it just a little bit every once in a while, You're going to kind of move it around. You're going to get all those sides, all the surface area of steak to move, and you're going to get an incredible crust. So here you can see it's flipped over. One side's nice and crusty. You can see that fat starting to render on the sides. And we're just going to keep repeating this action till you reach your desired temperature. So it's all up to you, however rare or well done you want it. I'm not going to judge you. Eat your steak how you want to. We're just going to keep turning this around. You can see some of that fat rendering from the beef itself. We're going to add a little bit of rosemary and a crushed clove of garlic and a pat of butter, because why not? It tastes delicious. And we're going to spoon all that hot oil and beef fat onto that butter, and we're going to start to baste our steaks. This is going to help with the flavor, both that rosemary and that garlic, as well as adding the crust and kind of cooking that steak at the same time. So you can see that there's that foam in that butter. That means that your butter is not burnt, nor is it breaking. That's a good sign. You're just going to continuously do this for about 2 to 5 minutes, depending on how rare, again, and how well done you want it. We're going to continue doing this. As soon as it starts to break and you lose that foam, you're going to want to take that butter out because it's burnt and it's going to become very acrid. And then when it comes to doneness of your steak, it's kind of all up to you, but a good way of testing the doneness is by feel. So if you look at your palm of your hand and you're looking at your thumb and that webbing between your thumb and your index finger, and you poke that, it's a little soft, that's going to be your rare. And as you move closer to the knuckle of your thumb, the more well done it gets. So you kind of can figure out there. I like to go kind of in between the web of your index and your thumb, and that's kind of where I go. So medium rare to medium. All right, and the most important thing, let your steak rest. So onto a wire rack, we're just gonna let that sit for at least 5 minutes. This is gonna let those juices kind of move back into the center of the steak so you don't have a dry steak. I know it's hard. I love digging in right away. So it's been 5 minutes. We're going to remove the bone. You can totally eat this just like this. We're just gonna plate it up a little different. So I'm gonna remove the bone and we're gonna slice it into smaller pieces from here. Make sure you have a nice sharp knife. That's quite important so you don't tear up the meat. And you're going to want to cut against the grain. So if you look at the beef itself, you'll notice there's lines running down it. You're going to cut against those, and this is going to give you a more tender piece. All right, and it's time to plate. So we're going to do one with that port sauce and those asparagus with shallots and garlic, and then we're going to do one with the hollandaise and just simply roasted asparagus. So here's the one with shallots, garlic, a little bit of sherry, and we're going to add our port sauce right in the middle. This is quite rich and tangy, so a little sauce goes quite a long way. And for our other one, we're going to just do the hollandaise with simply roasted asparagus. So this is super easy, just a little bit of asparagus, and we're going to pour that hollandaise right over the top. You notice the hollandaise is just a little liquidy. It turned out slightly too thin. Of course, this can be fixed with just one more egg yolk and a little bit more butter, and you will have some nice hollandaise as well, or béarnaise. If you enjoyed the video, please go ahead and give that a like, as well as subscribe, and we'll see you guys next week.